In 1966, something appeared in the hills of West Virginia, something that would terrify an entire town for 13 months straight. Witnesses described it as a massive creature, 7 feet tall, wings like an angel of death, and eyes, glowing red eyes that seemed to burn right through you. They called it the Mothman, and over 100 people claimed to see it. But here is the strange part. Almost every single sighting happened in the same location, an abandoned military facility just outside of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. The locals called it the TNT Area. What was this place? Why were there so many sightings there? And what exactly was the government storing in those sealed concrete bunkers that they never wanted anyone to see? This is the story of the TNT Area, the place where the Mothman lived. Before we dive in, if you enjoy mysteries like this one, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We cover the strangest and most unexplained events from around the world. Now, let us go back to West Virginia in 1942. During World War II, the United States government needed to produce massive amounts of explosives, and they needed to do it fast. So they built hundreds of munitions plants across the country. One of them was the West Virginia Ordnance Works, located just a few miles outside of Point Pleasant. This facility was enormous. It employed 3,500 workers at its peak, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Its sole purpose was to manufacture one thing: trinitrotoluene. You probably know it by its abbreviation, TNT. The plant produced thousands of pounds of high explosives every single day. But they had a problem. Where do you store that much TNT safely? The answer was underground. Engineers constructed nearly 100 concrete domes across the property. Each dome was half buried in the earth, designed to look like small hills from above so enemy planes could not spot them. These structures were called igloos because of their shape, but to the locals, they were simply known as the bunkers. Each igloo could store massive quantities of explosives and ammunition. The thick concrete walls were designed to contain any accidental detonation. If one bunker exploded, the blast would be directed upward and away from the other structures. At least, that was the theory. For 3 years, the plant operated without major incident. Then, in 1945, the war ended. And almost overnight, the West Virginia Ordnance Works shut down. The workers went home, the machinery was dismantled, and the bunkers were sealed. But here is where it gets interesting. Not all of those bunkers were emptied. Some of them remained locked, doors chained shut, warning signs posted, off limits to everyone except authorized military personnel. The land was eventually converted into the McClintock Wildlife Management Area. Hunters and hikers were allowed on parts of the property, but certain sections remained restricted, fenced off, guarded, and nobody in Point Pleasant knew why. For 20 years, the TNT area sat mostly forgotten. Trees grew over the bunkers, vines covered the entrances. The concrete domes slowly merged back into the landscape. And then, in November of 1966, everything changed. It was November 12th, late at night. 5 men were working in a cemetery near the town of Clendenin, just north of Point Pleasant. They were preparing a grave for a burial the next day. That is when they saw it. Rising from the trees nearby was what they described as a brown, human-like figure. Except it had wings, large wings that carried it effortlessly over their heads. The men watched in stunned silence as it glided across the cemetery and disappeared into the darkness. They reported the sighting to local authorities, but of course, nobody believed them. 5 grave diggers claiming to see a flying man? It sounded like a tall tale, a prank, something to laugh about at the local bar. That changed 3 days later. On November 15, 1966, 2 young couples were driving near the TNT area. Roger and Linda Scarberry, Steve and Mary Millette. They were just teenagers looking for a place to park and hang out. Instead, they encountered something that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. As they drove past an abandoned power plant on the edge of the TNT facility, Linda noticed something near the building. 2 large red circles glowing in the darkness. At first, she thought they were reflectors, but then the circles moved, and she realized they were eyes. Roger stopped the car. The headlights illuminated a creature unlike anything they had ever seen. It was massive, at least 7 feet tall, gray or brown in color, with a muscular humanoid body. But instead of arms, it had wings, huge wings folded against its back. And those eyes, those terrible red eyes. Linda later described the eyes as having a hypnotic effect. She could not look away. She could not think. All she could do was stare into those burning red orbs while her entire body went cold with fear. Then the creature moved. It shuffled toward them with an awkward, almost mechanical gait. Roger slammed the car into gear and floored the accelerator. They tore down the road at over 100 miles per hour, but the creature did not give up. It rose into the air and followed them. Witnesses say it did not flap its wings like a bird. It simply ascended straight up, like a helicopter, and glided after their car, making a screeching sound that Roger described as a squeaking mouse, but 1,000 times louder. The creature chased them all the way to the Point Pleasant city limits. Only then did it finally break off and vanish into the night. The 4 teenagers went straight to the police station, shaking and terrified. And this time, the authorities took notice. The next morning, the Mason County Sheriff held a press conference. He announced that credible witnesses had reported seeing a large, unidentified flying creature near the TNT area. The local newspaper ran the story, and a reporter gave the creature a name that would stick forever: the Mothman. Within days, sightings exploded across Point Pleasant. It seemed like everyone had seen the Mothman or knew someone who had. A volunteer fire chief saw it. Construction workers saw it. A local doctor saw it. Even the sheriff himself reportedly had an encounter. But the most disturbing pattern was this: the vast majority of sightings occurred in or around the TNT area, near the bunkers, near the old power plant, near those sealed concrete domes that the government had locked up decades ago. People started asking questions. What was in those bunkers? Were the bunkers really empty like the military claimed? Or was there something else stored down there? Something that could explain what they were seeing. Some residents reported strange lights coming from the bunkers at night. Glowing orbs of different colors: red, green, blue, moving among the trees and vanishing when approached. Others heard sounds, low humming, mechanical noises, screams that sounded almost human, but not quite. A few brave souls tried to investigate. They hiked into the TNT area at night, armed with flashlights and cameras. What they found only deepened the mystery. Many of the bunker doors were still sealed with heavy chains and padlocks. Warning signs indicated the structures were government property. Trespassing was forbidden, but some of the bunkers were open, or at least partially open. Investigators found massive steel doors hanging off their hinges, thick concrete walls with strange stains, and in one bunker, claw marks, deep gouges in the concrete that looked like something had been trying to escape. What could make marks like that? What was strong enough to scratch solid concrete? The military never explained. They never acknowledged the marks existed. And when pressed about the contents of the bunkers, they gave the same answer every time: classified. The TNT area had another secret that would not come to light until years later: chemical contamination. During the war, the manufacturing process created enormous amounts of toxic waste, TNT byproducts, heavy metals, carcinogens. All of it was dumped into the surrounding soil and groundwater. In 1983, the Environmental Protection Agency designated the TNT area as a Superfund cleanup site, one of the most polluted places in America. Tests revealed the soil was saturated with explosive compounds. The water was undrinkable. Wildlife in the area showed signs of genetic abnormalities. This discovery led to a new theory about the Mothman. What if the creature was not supernatural at all? What if it was a mutation, something created by decades of chemical exposure? A bird or animal that had been transformed by the toxic environment into something monstrous. The theory gained traction when researchers noted that the TNT area was home to large populations of great blue herons and sandhill cranes. Both birds can stand over 4 feet tall, with wingspans of nearly 7 feet. In low light, with their eyes reflecting red, they could potentially be mistaken for something much more terrifying. But witnesses rejected this explanation. Linda Scarberry, in particular, was adamant. She stated clearly, "I know what a bird looks like. What we saw was not a bird. It was something else entirely." The sightings continued throughout 1967. Dozens of reports every month. The Mothman was seen on rooftops, in trees, standing in fields, and always circling back to the TNT area, as if drawn to it, as if it lived there. Then came the speculation about government involvement. Cold War paranoia was at its height. The Soviet Union had just launched satellites. America was testing nuclear weapons. Secret projects were everywhere. And some residents began to wonder, was the Mothman part of an experiment? There were rumors that the bunkers housed more than just old explosives. Some claimed the military had conducted biological experiments there. Others believed radioactive materials were stored underground. A few even suggested the government was testing advanced aircraft or drones that could explain the flying creature. None of these claims were ever verified. The military maintained that the bunkers contained only decommissioned ordnance, rusted shells, empty casings, nothing more. But they never allowed independent inspections, and they never explained why some bunkers remained sealed to this day. The Mothman sightings continued for 13 months, and then, on December 15, 1967, something terrible happened. Something that would change Point Pleasant forever. The Silver Bridge connected Point Pleasant to Gallipolis, Ohio. It was a suspension bridge built in 1928. Hundreds of cars crossed it every day. At 4:58 in the afternoon, during rush hour traffic, the bridge began to shake. Within seconds, the entire structure collapsed. 37 vehicles plunged into the freezing Ohio River below. 46 people died. It was one of the worst bridge disasters in American history. The official cause was determined to be structural failure. A single eye-bar chain had developed a microscopic crack that went undetected for decades. Under the stress of heavy traffic, it finally gave way. a tragic accident caused by poor maintenance and inadequate inspections. But residents of Point Pleasant had a different explanation. Many of them believed the Mothman had been warning them, that the creature appeared not to terrorize them, but to prepare them for disaster. Some witnesses even claimed they saw the Mothman perched on the Silver Bridge in the days leading up to the collapse. After December 15th, the sightings stopped, almost immediately. The Mothman was never reliably reported in Point Pleasant again. It was as if its mission was complete. The disaster it had been prophesying finally happened, and now it could leave. This interpretation was popularized by author John Keel in his 1975 book, The Mothman Prophecies. Keel spent months investigating the case. He interviewed witnesses, collected reports, and ultimately concluded that the Mothman was some kind of interdimensional entity, a harbinger of doom that appears before catastrophes. If you want to go deeper into this rabbit hole, I actually recommend checking out his book. It is the definitive investigation into the Mothman, written by someone who was actually there talking to witnesses. I will leave a link in the description and in the pinned comment if you are curious. Keel also noted the connection to the TNT area. He believed the abandoned facility was not just a location, it was a portal, a thin place where our world intersected with something else. The chemicals and radiation had weakened the barrier between dimensions, and the Mothman slipped through. Is that true? Nobody knows. What we do know is that something happened in Point Pleasant in 1966 and 67. Over 100 people saw something unexplainable, and most of those sightings occurred near a facility the government never fully opened to investigation. The TNT area is still there today. The bunkers still stand. Most are crumbling now, covered in graffiti and vegetation. But some remain locked, still sealed after 80 years, still guarded by warning signs and fences. In 2010, one of those bunkers made headlines again. A private company had leased the structure for storage. They were keeping 15,000 to 20,000 pounds of military-issued gunpowder inside. The bunker exploded. The blast was heard for miles. Thankfully, no one was killed, but it raised new questions. If bunkers were being leased for private storage, what else might be hidden down there? What other secrets were tucked away in those concrete domes? And why, after all these decades, has the government never conducted a full public accounting of every structure? Today, Point Pleasant embraces its strange history. There is a 12-foot-tall Mothman statue in the center of town, a Mothman museum, an annual Mothman festival that draws thousands of visitors. The creature that once terrified the community has become its biggest tourist attraction. But not everyone celebrates. Linda Scarberry, who passed away in 2011, maintained until her death that what she saw was real, that it was not a bird, not a hoax, not a hallucination. She saw a creature, and that creature came from the TNT area. The bunkers are still there, hidden among the trees, slowly being reclaimed by nature. If you drive down the rural roads outside Point Pleasant, you can still see them. Concrete domes emerging from the hillsides like ancient tombs. Some open, some sealed. All of them holding secrets we may never fully understand. What was the Mothman? A misidentified bird? A government experiment? A chemical mutation? An interdimensional entity? After nearly 60 years, we still do not have an answer. But there is one thing we can say for certain. over 100 people saw something in Point Pleasant. Something with red eyes, something with wings, something that emerged from an abandoned weapons facility and terrorized a community for 13 months before vanishing without a trace. The TNT Area remains one of the most mysterious locations in America, a place where Cold War secrets and supernatural sightings intersect, a place the government sealed and never fully explained, a place where, if the witnesses are to be believed, something incredible once lived. Maybe it is still there, waiting in the darkness of those bunkers, behind those sealed doors, with its red eyes glowing, watching, waiting. What was really in those bunkers? We may never know. If you want to hear more mysteries like this one, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. I cover the strangest cases from around the world every single week. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think the Mothman really was. And I will see you in the next one.